When most people start looking into heat pumps, they usually have the same three questions. Will my home actually be warm enough? How much is it going to cost to run? And perhaps the biggest concern of all, am I going to have to replace every radiator and turn my house into a building site? Before we recommend a heat pump, before we talk about radiators, and before we even think about flow temperatures, we need to understand something much more important: the house itself. Because every heating system has exactly the same job, whether it's a gas boiler, an oil boiler, or a heat pump. Its purpose is simply to replace the heat that your home is losing. So before we can decide what heating system your home needs, we first need to understand how much heat it's actually losing. Now, imagine it's one of the coldest days of the year. Outside it's freezing, possibly -5 or colder. Inside, you want every room to be a comfortable 21 degrees. At that moment, your home is constantly losing heat. Heat escapes through the roof, through the walls, through the windows, through the floor, and even through tiny little gaps around doors and windows. Your heating system is continuously replacing that heat to maintain a comfortable indoor temperature. If your home loses 5 kilowatts of heat, your heating system needs to replace 5 kilowatts. If it loses 8 kilowatts, it needs to replace 8. It's really that simple. The challenge is working out how much heat each room loses, and that's where proper engineering begins. The amount of heat your home loses depends on what's known as the building fabric, and that's everything that makes your house. Your walls, your roof, your windows, your floor, and your insulation. And we even look at how airtight the property is. Two houses can look almost identical from the outside but perform completely differently because they're built differently. One might have modern cavity wall insulation and triple glazing. The other might have solid walls and older double glazing. From the street, they appear the exact same. And from an engineering perspective, they're completely different buildings. That's why every Heat Geek survey starts with understanding the construction of your home. Because good engineering starts with understanding the building, not necessarily the heating system. Once we understand how your home behaves, we can begin designing the heating system around it. One thing you'll hear industry experts talk about a lot is designing every room to comfortably maintain 21 degrees on the coldest day of the year. Now, this isn't an arbitrary number, it's our design target temperature. If every room can comfortably achieve 21 degrees when it's at its coldest outside, then we know the system will perform beautifully through the rest of the winter. And that's an important distinction. We're not designing a system that just about copes. We're designing one that's engineered around your home and your comfort. Everything we've spoken about so far, the heat loss, the building fabric, the room-by-room calculations, all lead us to one goal: understanding exactly what your home needs. Once we've established that, we can begin designing the heating system itself. And this is where things really start to get interesting. Before this, let me give you a quick explanation of who we are and why we are so excited to be partnered with Heat Geek. Since 2006, the natural energy company has been installing heat pumps right across Scotland. In late December 2025, we made the decision that partnering with Heat Geek was the right way to go. It allowed us to really elevate what we do as a company, improve our quality of installation and building regulation compliance. We wanted the best for all of our customers. So, once we understand the building and exactly how much heat each room requires, the next question naturally becomes, how do we actually design the system? And this is where the Heat Geek design app comes into its own. When we visit your home, one of the first things you'll notice is that we're carrying an iPad throughout the whole survey. And this isn't just for taking notes. It's the tool we use to build a complete digital model of your property as we walk around. Room by room, we're measuring the spaces, recording ceiling heights, identifying external walls, windows and doors, and entering details about the construction of your home. We're recording insulation levels, glazing types, the age of the property, and anything else that influences how your home loses heat. As we move through the house, the iPad is gradually building a complete digital twin of your property. And by the time we finish the survey, we haven't simply measured your home, we've recreated it digitally on the iPad. That digital model allows the software to calculate exactly how much heat every room loses, even on the coldest day of the year. From there, we know exactly how much heat every room needs to maintain a comfortable 21 degrees. Everything from this point onwards is based on engineering data rather than assumptions. And once we've understood what your home needs, the next stage is looking at the heating system that's already there. And this is another area where I think Heat Geek's approach really stands out. Rather than walking into a property and assuming every radiator needs replacing, we assess what you've already got in the home. Every single radiator is measured, its type is identified, its output is calculated, and then we compare that against the heat pump requirement for that room. Now, sometimes we find a radiator that's already perfectly suited to the space. Sometimes it may need to be slightly larger, and sometimes it might need to be replaced altogether. The important point is that every single recommendation is backed by data, not assumptions, and no rules of thumb. Now we get to one of my favorite parts of the whole process, because once we've built that digital model of your home, we can begin exploring different design options. And we're no longer guessing, we're modeling exactly the data that we've taken. For example, we can ask what happens if we keep every existing radiator? What flow temperature would the heat pump need to run at? And how efficient would that system be? Plus, how much electricity would it use over a year? And how much would that actually cost every single year to run? Then we can ask it another question. What happens if we replace just 2 radiators? How much does that increase or decrease the flow temperature by? Plus, how much does it change the efficiency by? And how much would that change the annual running cost? And finally, we can ask another question, which would be, what if we changed every radiator in the house? Again, within moments, the software recalculates the entire heating system. Every option can be compared side by side. Installation costs, flow temperatures for each proposed system, the seasonal efficiencies for each system, and the predicted annual running costs for each system. They're all in front of us, right there for us to discuss live. One of the biggest conversations we have with homeowners is around flow temperature, and that's the temperature that goes around your radiators or underfloor heating. You've probably heard people say, the lower the flow temperature, the better. And generally speaking, that is true. Lower flow temperatures usually improve the efficiency of a heat pump. But here's the important part. That doesn't automatically make it the best solution. Let me give you an example. Let's imagine your existing radiators require your heat pump to operate at a flow temperature of around 50 degrees. Now, imagine we replace every radiator in the property. Perhaps we can reduce that flow temperature to around 42 degrees. Fantastic. The heat pump becomes more efficient, electricity consumption falls, running costs reduce, and on paper, that looks like it could be the perfect answer. But engineering simply doesn't stop there, because now we need to ask another question. What did it cost to achieve that improvement? If replacing every radiator costs, say, £4,000, but only saves you £100 a year, you're looking at a payback period that could stretch into decades. At that point, we've got to ask ourselves, have we genuinely designed a better heating system? Or have we simply spent more money to achieve a better efficiency figure? That's the difference between chasing efficiency and delivering long-term value. This is where Heat Geek's design philosophy really comes into its own. We're not trying to design the most efficient heating system at any cost. We're trying to design the most sensible one. Sometimes replacing every radiator genuinely makes financial sense. Sometimes replacing 2 or 3 radiators gives you almost all of the benefit for a fraction of the cost. And sometimes keeping every existing radiator and allowing the heat pump to operate at a slightly higher flow temperature is actually the smarter financial decision. Every single home has a sweet spot, the point where comfort, efficiency, installation costs, and long-term savings all come together. Every decision has a cost and every decision has a benefit. Our job is to make sure the benefit justifies the cost. That's exactly what Heat Geek and the Natural Energy Company delivers together.
We moved here in October and we've had an air source heat pump installed within the last couple of months. The house was previously on oil via an oil tank. We were quite conscious that that's very environmentally unfriendly. We were very impressed when David came out to survey the house with his approach to dealing with a house that is slightly unusual in terms of its build. It's got lots of different parts at different ages, insulated in different ways. We'd had at least one other company essentially say that they weren't interested in the job because they thought it was going to be too complicated. And actually, when David came out to do the survey, he said it was very doable and doable at a sensible price as well. The Natural Energy Company has been great to work with. They're all very approachable and very pleasant. The communication has been excellent. We know multiple people who've had natural energy install heat pumps via Heat Geek, and they've all spoken very highly of them. The disruption's been kept to the minimum despite it being quite a big installation, and ultimately we were only without heating for about 24 hours or so.
This design process is exactly why we partnered with Heat Geek. It isn't simply because they produce great training, and it certainly isn't because of a logo that we can put on our website. It's because their philosophy aligns with ours. Design first, understand the building, engineer the system you're installing, then install it. The Heat Geek process gives us confidence that every recommendation we make is backed by engineering, real-world data, and sound financial reasoning. Not assumptions, not guesswork, and not simply just because that's the way it's always been done. That's incredibly important to us because every home is different. Every customer has different priorities. Some people want to achieve the absolute lowest possible running cost. Some people want the quickest return on investment. Others simply want the least disruption possible. There isn't one perfect solution. There's only one right solution for that particular home and that particular customer. For me, this is what Heat Geek is really about. It's not about fitting the biggest heat pump, and it's not about replacing the most radiators, and it's certainly not about chasing the lowest flow temperature just because we can. It's about understanding your home, understanding how it loses heat, understanding which improvements genuinely add value, and then by designing a heating system that delivers the best balance of comfort, efficiency, installation cost, and long-term running costs. Because when you get the design right, everything else simply follows. The heat pump itself is just the appliance. The real engineering happens long before it's ever installed. So if you're ever thinking about installing a heat pump, don't just ask what heat pump you should buy. Ask about how your home is going to be designed, because that's what determines how comfortable your home will be, how much it will cost to run, and whether you'll still be delighted with your heating system 10 or 20 years from now. If you'd like to experience the Heat Geek design process for yourself, we'd love to help. At the Natural Energy Company, every project starts with understanding your home before we recommend a solution. We'll carry out a full Heat Geek design, model different options, explain the reasoning behind every recommendation, and help you choose the solution that makes the most sense for your home. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you in the next one.